Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you about this film. Maybe you could kick off with a brief introduction to Child of Mine. What can people expect if they watch your film?
Uh, uh, they can expect to see a film about a mother who's struggling with being a mother. It's a first-time mother, and she's dealing with the consequences of a rough childhood herself, and then how that reflects on her own ability to be a mother for her newborn.
And what was the inspiration for telling this story? I mean, not to sound like I'm being stereotypical, but what made you want to kind of delve into the particular experiences of a new mother, and I guess these kind of cycles of abuse and trauma?
The movie was not a film that I thought up myself, in the sense that the whole thing started with an organization here in Denmark called Tuba, and Tuba is an organization who helps kids and young people dealing with abusive and alcoholic parents. So they wanted to do, instead of just doing a normal campaign in trying to get more young people to go to Tuba in order to get help, they wanted to do fiction and tell a story through fiction. And by doing so, hopefully, reach out to a lot more people than normally. So I did a film for them last year, and then they wanted me to do another one for them. And then they said that the framework for this film has to deal with young mothers, and especially young women who grew up themselves with a mother who was an alcoholic, and how that reflected on their own ability to be a mother. And then I said, no, that's not, you're asking the wrong director, because I thought, a female director should do this or write this. But they kept, insisting that I was the right person to do it. And then I said, okay, let me at least try and talk to some of the people that you have inside the organization, and also some of the young girls who you have helped through this process. And then, of course, I got on the phone and got to talk to two women who were in the same situation as Anna, the lead in the movie. And then, of course, I got very inspired by hearing their stories, and then I agreed to do the film. But really, the whole process was talking to a lot of people with this experience, and talking to my own wife, and just surround myself with a lot of, because it's difficult for me. I didn't grow up in a family with alcoholic parents. So the worst thing for me is to do something where people who have been in this situation doesn't recognize what I'm doing or talking about. So very careful in talking to people and get the right inspiration. So really, I really tried not to do this movie. Not that I don't think it's an important movie, but yeah, I ended up doing it anyway. I got too inspired by talking to the real people.
And so what was that process like of kind of translating the research you did into the fictional story? Would you say it's sort of loosely based on kind of an amalgamation of the stories and experiences you heard, or did you pick one particular story and then kind of fictionalize it for this?
No, I did. I think it was a more general kind of. Some specific situations survived into the film, but the overall story is a more general story. I think that has to do with, and that's something that I saw in all the stories. There's two things I believe that goes again in all the stories and from the people that I talked to, which is, of course, a lot of guilt, because it's difficult when you're told, from a young age that you're part of the problem. Then you tend to believe in that, and that seems to survive for a very long time within these persons or women. And then, of course, the insecurity about your own lack of or talent or ability to be a mother, because you haven't really seen what a real mother should be like. So I think, with all the people I talked to, they all kind of tended to, they were overthinking their role as a mother, and because they wanted to do so well, and they wanted not to be that reflection of their own terrible mother. And by overthinking, then you also start to get a little bit nervous, and then you start to question yourself if you're doing it right or not. And I think that went through, but that was a common kind of theme through all the stories that I heard. Then the specific situations, like all the really, when you had that flashback late in the movie, with the mother peeing on the floor, or the scene where she's threatening the girl with taking her own life by electrocuting herself, all these scenes were directly taken out from real persons' lives and experiences.
And what do you think that perhaps you learned yourself going through that process and of making the film? Was it incredibly eye-opening, I guess, to kind of hear what it's like for women in general, kind of going through motherhood, but then actually having to suffer through these kind of traumatic experiences?
I mean, working with this subject last year, also I did another movie for Tuba, but it had the point of view of a young boy and him struggling with a father. So I've learned a lot in general about how it is to be a young person growing up with alcoholic parents, and how it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. I also learned maybe that even though that this might look like a story about women and on the surface, I still believe that even though I'm not a woman, that you can actually tell these stories, and because they have a universal theme really underneath it all. And I've been very surprised that I thought very much this movie was a helping kind of tool to women in this specific situation with alcoholic parents. But I see a lot of it seems like it's striking a core, with other people also, just women in general who feel a little bit insecure about their own ability to be a great mom, no matter if you have an alcoholic parent or not. So in that regard, I think it's blown up into greater, bigger proportions when you have that background with alcoholic parents. But so I'm surprised that so many women, see themselves in this film and can take something from it and use it in a more kind of in a broader way, which is nice, of course.
And can you tell us a bit about, kind of the making of it, in particular, working with your cast, with Matilda, Anna, and, what were some of the kind of challenges but highlights of the shoot?
It's always difficult with a short movie. You never have enough money, so we had to shoot this film over 4 days. So a lot of planning, of course, goes into this, but also not only the cast was new to me, also people behind the camera was all new. I've been working with the same crew for the last 10 years on both my American feature and all my Danish short films. But with this one, I wanted an all-female cast around me, so also behind the camera. So I shot with a Danish DP, Louise, who's a wonderful DP, and I got a new editor, also a woman editor. So I really just surrounded myself with a lot of, strong opinions women. And so in some regard, I guess it kind of affected the way I would normally work, because I felt like I had to invent a new language, not because they're women, just because they were new people. When you have been working with people for many years, it tends to get less and less words, in that work relationship. But here I had to, which was good because we really got to plan the movie in a nice way. I mean, the highlight, of course, it's always for me working with the actors, and Matilda was just phenomenal, and I can say that for all of the cast, and of course for the young girl Ella. I've worked with many kid actors, and it's always a pleasure with the young ones, because when you find the right one, they have such an authentic way and such an authentic presence that I always get high on. So it's always a highlight for me to have a talented kid on the set, because it also inspires the grown-ups. When you're a grown-up actor, you tend to, again, sometimes put too much thought into it, because that it's part of being a professional and you want to interpret the part in the proper way, and a lot of conversation goes into it. But I guess there's something about children being so natural and relying a lot on their intuition that also reflects back on some of the more experienced actors that tend to make for a great working space. So yeah, that was just a pleasure working with all of them.
Tell us a bit about the kind of look and feel of the film and how you sort of used the way it was shot to reflect the story. And just thinking of things like, the flashbacks, perhaps everything looks a bit darker, more claustrophobic, and then sort of like that light airiness of the present day house. And, how do things like that in the way you work and the way you shoot a film add to how people feel and experience the story?
Yeah, so it was, because of the fact that we were only shooting this in 2 locations, and we only had those 2 locations to really build the story from visually. For me, they had to be really 2 distinct worlds. So very much on purpose, we found this modern, new, light apartment, and then had the contrast with the more old, smoky, brownish kind of apartment from the past. And yeah, it was an obvious, decision to make that more dark and the other one more light, in order to kind of, it's something, of course, visually, it's something that will build on the audience, but it's in a more subtle way, I guess. And then, of course, at the very last scene, I felt like, instead of going, because we discussed, with all these memories from the past, do you want to go into different rooms, or do you want to make it more abstract? And there was something, when she thinks back on all these horrific situations from her past, but I felt like it would be more interesting to make it almost like a theater. So you use that one specific space of that big living room, because in the script, it was actually written as you walk down a hallway and you go into different rooms. But then all of a sudden we had this beautiful location, and we kind of staged it almost like theater. So she walks around and it becomes one fluent camera movement going through that experience of looking into specific situations from the past. And I felt that kind of abstract way of telling a story really, for me, yeah, like I said, it made it more claustrophobic, and it kind of gave a feeling of everywhere you look, there's something from the past that will be popping up. You can't really escape it. It's just, it's in all the corners. It's everywhere around you. You can't shut a door to it. So that was part of why that scene ended up like it did. And then, of course, the whole mix of, when do you reveal the true connection visually between these 2? And for me, I always felt like it was when you saw that picture, the photo from the past, when she's picking up the photo from the working desk at Anna's apartment, and you see this old photo from Italy when she's young, and then the young version of her is, obviously the neighboring girl. I thought that would be like the moment when everybody would go. But now I've experienced that that's not the moment, because people go, oh, I didn't realize, I don't think she looked as, that much as the neighboring girl. And so people have totally, I thought I would be able to manipulate and control people to that exact point when they would realize what the true story or the true nature of the story was. But I guess people are much much more smart and clever than I thought them to be. And so some people really get it really fast, and other people won't get it before at the very end, when they sit in the same room, hiding behind the couch. So that also just, sometimes, I guess, you think you can control everything, but you underestimate the power of the audience ability to put 2 and 2 together. When did you figure out the true kind of nature of things and connections?
I think it was, yeah, to do with the picture. I can't remember exactly. I watched it last week or so, but yeah, I think it was then.
Yeah.
So it's funny how everyone's watching it from a different perspective or focusing on different
Yeah.
things. You can't control
Yeah.
everything as a filmmaker.
No.
And what do you hope the impact of the film to be then? Because of course it's tackling a difficult topic, but as you said, people are connecting with it on different levels. So, you know, is it kind of just bringing awareness to issues like this? Is it kind of shining a light on female experiences, which perhaps we didn't see enough of before? And maybe there aren't enough conversations about the insecurities and particular things that women face in motherhood.
I mean, of course, it started on a very practical level from my, from my point of view, because I was asked to come in and do a movie for this organization, and I really wanted to help. I thought they had a great cause, and I loved the way they were thinking about it, and I loved the whole idea about trying to do fiction in order to reach more people. And I think they're right. I think this way of communicating, and really Tuba is, so just to really understand the purpose of the movie you can see on their homepage, and everybody in Denmark can access this. And we have been talking in media about this, so it has gone out to a big audience. But the real purpose is that more people who are in this situation will see this movie, they will be aware of Tuba, and they will call them up and get some help, because that's what they do. They have a lot of people hired and working for Tuba who's really just there 24/7 to help people. So that's the real intention of this. Then, like you said, and that's also on Tuba's mind, there haven't been enough attention to that specific subject matter of being a mother and dealing with insecurities, no matter if you come from a home with alcoholism or not. And like I said, I've also been surprised at how this movie is able to kind of travel and affect a bigger audience than was intended, which just makes me really happy. And I guess it confirms that not enough movies are being made about this subject matter. And it's such a big thing, and again, I said, part of the inspiration was also talking to my wife, and not that she has been, any different than other women having children, but I think it is a big part of motherhood, also of, being a father, but in a different way, I would say. The fact that, the world has just, turned into a place where we have to be so damn perfect, and I guess it also has to do with social media and all kinds of things that will have an impact on your ideas about what a great mom is. So I think more than ever in these times, I think these kind of films that talk about the difficulties of, being a mother, and these really big important parts of anyone's life, where we constantly, and it goes for the men as well, being presented with an unreal, unnatural, world approach. Yeah, I definitely think, and I'm happy if it can help in that way as well. And more film should deal with these, and I guess a lot of films are dealing with trying to show normality and trying to go away from that perfect image that we're being presented with constantly, around us on social media and so on.
And obviously you won an Academy Award, was it 2014, for your short film Helium? And so yeah. What does that kind of recognition at that level do for your career, and what does that mean to you as a filmmaker, and what would you hope the trajectory be for a film like the one you've just made?
I mean, it meant a lot to me winning the Oscar. It was a little strange and a bizarre experience. It was always, obviously a beautiful one, but I had only made 2 shorts, and then I made Helium. I've, directed movies for 1.5 years, and then all of a sudden I found myself on that stage looking down on Brad Pitt and Meryl Streep, and that was bizarre. And I was there with Thomas Winterberg that year. He was nominated for The Hunt, back then in Best International category. And he lost the Oscar. We were all like a big Danish delegation and all expecting that he would win. And I was just, having fun with being nominated. And then he didn't win, and I won for that short movie. So it's just a crazy experience. And eventually it led to me doing my first feature in America, I Killed Giants. And moving there, I moved there for a year with my family to do that movie. And so, yeah, it's just kind of, I went from someone who was doing short films in Denmark for a budget of nothing to all of a sudden be doing a rather big American feature. And so it changed my life overnight in that aspect. And it made, I guess, my journey towards doing features a bit shorter. And now with this one, I thought that I would just go from feature to feature now, but then I sometimes it takes a little bit of time to develop the right feature project and find the money. And then this came around and I thought, wow, a good course and also an excuse to actually not just do a commercial to make money, but do something with real actors and a chance to write a screenplay again. And so I ended up doing these 2 shorts now over the last 2 years. I'm directing a feature now in a couple of months, but it has been great being back to doing shorts. There's also something about just, with a feature, you work on it for 3 years. Here you develop something and rather fast you go into production and you get to shoot a movie, and the process is kind of similar to doing a feature. So it's a nice exercise, and these 2 movies have come very close to my heart, just like Helium. So I hope it will travel far and forget about the Oscars, but that's just, I guess, what, when you have a producer, they would always want to play that as something that should be that could be considered for an Oscar. Who cares?
And can you tell us a bit about the feature you're working on? Can you tell us a bit about the story, or you have to keep still?
Yeah, it's a very interesting movie. It deals with the German refugees who came to Denmark at the end of the Second World War in 1945. 250,000 came here, which is a lot considering the size of the country. And there were a couple of months here where we didn't treat them that well. 13,000 innocent or German civilians died here, and 7,000 children died here because the Danish doctors in 1945 decided not to help, because they came here, having been on the run for some of them up to 6 months, and they were in a terrible condition when they arrived. And a conflict happened between the German occupation and the Danish doctors, and it led to 2 or 3 months when nobody was helping these people here in Denmark. And it's a story that a lot of Danish people don't realize, and are surprised about the magnitude of deaf children, especially, who didn't get help. So yeah, a rather serious movie, but also a very interesting chapter in the Danish World War II history.
And would you say that would you say there's something specific about Danish cinema? Maybe this film you have upcoming is like more obviously, rooted in Danish history, but more generally as a filmmaker, do you think there's something specific that your culture brings to the screen? And where would you sort of put your influences? Would it be other Danish filmmakers, or, from across the spectrum?
I think from across the spectrum, because obviously there are a lot of Danish filmmakers that I love. Thomas Winterberg, and also one named Bille August, and of course there's Lars von Trier. I don't think Lars von Trier is a big inspiration for me personally, but he's one who represents Danish theater, Danish cinema. But I mean, most of all, I think with the Danes, we're so constricted, or we don't have that much money to do our films for. So that kind of, it means that you have to think in certain stories. That's why you don't have Harry Potter coming out of Denmark. So most of the movies that come out of Denmark are stories that very much reflect real life and authentic life. I think that's a tradition here, of course. And some of the strongest voices the last years, like Tobias Lindholm and Winterberg, are very much stories about real human conflicts and dilemmas. And that's, I guess, what you most tend to see from Denmark and expect to see. I think Lars von Trier is this kind of one-off oddball that is doing something totally different. Yeah, so a certain authenticity and heart and stories that really want to put the human first, and not, put up on a background of great effects or just popcorn entertainment. It's always about the story that will inspire, or people are able to reflect their own lives in, I think. And I think we're pretty good at that. And maybe also making something universal, like The Hunt or Another Round last year, Another Round with Winterberg winning for Best Foreign Movie. And I think there's something in our nature and in the way we live that is easy to recognize, all over the world. It's these universal themes. So I think we're good at taking these universal themes and putting them into the small story. I guess at least that's what I try to do.
And who would you say are some of your idols from outside of Denmark?
I mean, I grew up on Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, and Sergio Leone was a big influence on me. But that mostly, I started my career not as a director. I didn't direct anything before I was 33. I was an illustrator and did comic books for 20 years since I was very young. So I was very inspired by the way of, the way they would use imagery to tell stories with. Because back then the Danish movies were really poor on telling pictures with visuals. Mostly it tended to be people talking because that was cheap. So I'm definitely someone who was raised on American movies and their sense of telling a story with pictures. And yeah, so a lot of the 80s stuff, of course, but also stuff from the 70s. Francis Ford Coppola, all the great ones.
Mm-hmm. And just finally, do you have any tips for people out there who want to kind of follow your path, even if it's, not until their 30s, just decide to break into filmmaking?
My tip is there's no excuse. 20 years ago, it was difficult to get your hands on equipment and camera. And I would meet so many people 20 years ago who would be writing screenplays. And they all had a story, right? But nobody would kind of turn it into a short film or, a real production, because the excuse would always be, but I would need money and I don't have the equipment. But now it has been democratized. Now it's like playing a guitar or writing a song. You can shoot a beautiful looking movie on your iPhone Pro 13 and it will just look fantastic. So my point is, the way the world is now, there's no damn excuse not going out, proving yourself, doing a short, doing whatever. So that's my best advice. Don't make an excuse for yourself, because then, it's gonna sound harsh to say, then you're not fit for it. Then that making movies is not your dream.
Yeah, good advice. Well, I think I've taken up too much of your time already, but it was so great to speak to you, and thanks so much for sharing all that with us. And yeah, I hope people are able to see this wonderful and poignant film, Child of Mine.